Good afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest show here at Up the Cherries in all departments. Now, before I do welcome on my special guest, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, as everybody will be aware, Bill Foley completed his purchase of AFC Bournemouth yesterday when it was all ratified by the Premier League. And he has actually written a letter to supporters as well, which will be referred to in this conversation with my special guest, who I will explain who it is in a moment. But I will read out the letter from Bill Foley. If you do wish to read it, it is on the AFC Bournemouth website. But it says, to all supporters of the Cherries in the UK and around the world, it is with a deep sense of gratitude and excitement that I share with you the news that my partners and I have completed the acquisition of AFC Bournemouth. I have been looking forward to this chance to connect with you since we began exploring this opportunity, and even more since my family and I visited the Vitality Stadium to experience an AFCB match for the first time last month. Of course, that was the game against Leicester City where we won 2-1. Although the paperwork shows a transfer of ownership to our group, I know that any successful sports organisation is held in trust for its community. We have accomplished that in Las Vegas, where the National Hockey League's Golden Knights, in just 6 years, have developed a rich and unbreakable connection with our fans. Our role then is to provide the support and investment needed to make our club, yours and mine, the best it can be on and off the pitch. We are committed to doing that with an eye towards sustained long-term success. Already, we identified several areas we will be focusing on: facilities, player development, player recruitment, supporter experience, and grow the game initiatives. These investments will stretch years into the future, aimed at maintaining and improving our position in the Premier League, as well as expanding participation at all levels of the game in our local region. Some initiatives will be immediately evident, most notably the construction of a new state-of-the-art training facility, of course, over at Camford Magna, to help our players reach their maximum potential and to show prospective players our commitment to success. We will continue to build programming and make investments intended to support the growth of the game in our community across all ages, genders, and experience levels. Another effect that will be felt around the grounds will be the presence of my family and myself. I'm excited to be returning to England for our next home match on New Year's Eve, of course, against Crystal Palace, as my wife Carol and I get comfortable with our home in Bournemouth. We plan to visit regularly to support the Cherries in person. Wherever I am, our staff and I want to hear your thoughts on how we can improve. I think you will find our philosophy and vision fits well with your goals for the team, progress, sustainable success, and the positive impact in the community. We know better than to expect instant gratification, but we will help AFC Bournemouth make steady progress toward our goals. Always advance, never retreat. Bill Foley. Well, so that's Bill's letter to the fans, but let's find out what a financial expert thinks of all this takeover. And it is a pleasure to welcome back onto Up the Cherries in all departments to discuss this takeover, Kieran Maguire. Afternoon, Kieran. How are you doing?
I'm shivering like the rest of the country, but other than that, all is good, and looking
Excellent.
forward to the third round of the League Cup, like most English football fans at present, as a distraction.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And although the World Cup has been exciting, it's strange to have it at this time of year. And we just want to get back to proper football, I think, most of us anyway.
Absolutely. Arguing with your mates down the pub is so much better when you've just been to the match yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So, of course, yesterday, Bill Foley completed his takeover at AFC Bournemouth for a reported 120 million pounds. So, with regards to the current setup, from what we know that Bill Foley is at the head of that group, part of Canai Holdings. Also involved are Michael B. Jordan. So we do have Adonis Creed of the Creed movies, but also Nullah Sarker, who is actually part of Kosmos, which is a company that's owned by Gerard Piqué and owns FC Andorra. So when the news come in yesterday, Kieran, what did you make of it?
Um, well, funnily enough, I was talking to somebody from another club yesterday morning before the story broke, and said, "Have you heard anything about the AFC Bournemouth takeover? Has it gone very quiet?" And he said, "Premier League is being very cautious with regards to owners and directors test issues, and that's proven to be the delay." He said, I still think the deal will go through. The Premier League got its fingers burnt to a certain extent with the Newcastle takeover, and therefore ever since then they've been very very forensic in terms of their analysis of any potential takeover or new owner. So I don't think it's a huge surprise that Mr. Demin has been looking to sell Bournemouth for a few years now. He's continued to put his money into the club, despite seeking new ownership. The devil, as always, is in the details of a takeover. From a financial point of view, is Bill Foley? Is he taking over the debts? Have the debts been settled as part of the deal? Those will be quite significant issues. And then it's trying to get an understanding as to the philosophy of the new ownership group. If you're looking to make a financial return, it's challenging times. And without being too rude to Bill Foley, he's not young. He's 77. So I would imagine that whatever he wants to do, he wants to do quickly.
Just looking at Maxim's time, and he's done a fantastic job with this football club. And I'm sure that everybody, be it a Bournemouth fan or not, will agree with that. But how much do the club actually owe or did owe to Maxim? And do you think, as part of the sale package, that he would have actually passed that to Foley and Foley would have been or settled it?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. I mean, per the most recent accounts, which were the 2021, the club owed him £128 million. But then it said in the small print that since the end of the year, he put in a further 24. So that takes us to a grand total of 152 million. And we don't know what's happened in recent months as well. There are a variety of things that could have happened. I mean, ultimately, it's a bit like buying a house. Now,
Mhm.
normally when you buy a house, the old owner, they sort out their mortgage
Yeah.
from the sale proceeds. So if that was the case, Bill Foley's group has paid, let's say 120 million. He gives that to Maxim, and it's then up to Maxim as to how he sorts out the intricacies, and effectively that 120 million would have been used, I suspect, to pay off the debts, and any outstanding debts would just have to be in a hit by the old owner,
Mhm.
unless there was some agreement between the two parties. If if Bill Foley's group has bought the club and inherited the debt, then I think they'll have just paid a nominal £1 for the club and take on those debt responsibilities. So finding out the intricacies of the deal is always interesting from a business perspective, but it's one of those things which ultimately is a private contract between two individuals, and they're under no legal obligation to disclose the small print to us as fans or other interested parties and stakeholders. What's also interesting in the case of AFC Bournemouth is that we saw the club get into some form of borrowing arrangement with Macquarie Bank.
Okay.
And that was a few months ago. And that was in respect of future TV revenues. So when Bournemouth were promoted back to the Premier League, they know that they've got this year's money plus a guaranteed 2 years of parachute payments. And they borrowed some amount. We don't know how much, but those future cash flows have been effectively Macquarie have now got first dibs on those. So the debt situation would be intriguing. As always, you're looking for the finances to be published, but clubs aren't in a hurry to do that.
One of the things that is on Bill Foley's to-do list is with regards to the new training ground. And it's interesting that you do mention that Macquarie loan, because it wasn't something that I knew a great deal about. But I could only imagine that that is being used to fund that training development. But there's a lot more on the to-do list. Do you think that Bill Foley might actually settle that with Macquarie and move forwards and effectively pay for it out of his own pocket, but hopefully get a return at the end?
It's a possibility, but the way that these documents are normally arranged, it's to protect both parties.
Mhm.
If he wants to settle early, there will be a financial penalty attached to
Okay.
that. So whilst you might save yourself interest in effect on the loans for another 12 months, 18 months, Macquarie will say, well, we were banking on receiving that money, so we're going to take a proportion of that as a penalty fee. In again, whilst I don't want to go too down the house analogy route, because not everybody owns a house, is that if you have a mortgage and you settle it early, quite often you'll have to pay penalties there as well.
Okie doke. Because that was quite interesting, because I didn't know much about that at all. But just looking at the plans, so the first one we've mentioned is the facilities. Of course, the training ground is part of that. However, new stadium, and we'll come on to that in a second. Player development, I guess that's part of the training ground as well. Player recruitment, supporter experience, and grow the game initiatives. So, with regards to timescales on all these things and how much it's going to cost, Dean Court, as you probably know, isn't owned by the football club. It's owned by Structadene. So, if, say, for example, Bill Foley comes in and says, "Look, the old Dean Court, and I absolutely love Dean Court. It is home.
Yeah.
However, I can understand that, having been to the Brighton ground, former, it's an amazing stadium. It's something that we're quite envious of, but at the same time, we don't want to lose our history. But I can imagine that Bill Foley will go down that route. Now, if he goes down that route, will it be a case that we need to buy back the existing ground from Structadene? Or may he say, well, at the end of the day, it's too much. I'll just build it anyway, and you're just left with this giant white elephant, Structadene.
It all depends on the price. would Bill Foley be able to get planning permission out on a new site? We're aware that land prices are high, and we're also aware that many people are very protected in terms of any form of development. And certainly, you name checked the Brighton Stadium. Brighton were homeless for for 14 years in effect.
Yes.
So it can be a slow, laborious, and challenging process for people to have to go through. And I get the impression from reading, I'm sure I've read the same articles as you have, Craig, in relation to Bill Foley. This is a man in a hurry. If you look at what he did with the Las Vegas Knights, he got an idea in his head, set up the ice hockey club, brought success, and he's been looking to do something similar in another sport. I think he might find the intricacies and the bureaucracy attached to UK planning and development legislation to be something which is going to frustrate him. So it could be that it would be easier to do something with the existing plot of land and come to an arrangement with the landlord. People are always willing to negotiate. Even those clubs whose owners say the club's not up for sale, if you put the right price in front of them, they'll sell.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that Dean Court at the moment has is that very, very big car park. It is owned by the council, but the Cooper Dean family actually gave the club that plot of land years and years and years ago. So that piece of land where the existing stadium is can only be used for sporting reasons. So that's why I'm wondering if that was a benefiting factor of why he's actually taken on Bournemouth and not another club.
You're absolutely right about it, because it's effectively got a restricted covenant. It does limit what can be done, and it does give the club a stronger position in form of any negotiations. Be it with the council or whoever, in the sense of saying that if we decide to leave here, you've got a problem, because those covenants are watertight. So I'm sure that he will have used professional advisors to go into the small print in terms of the key assets that were being acquired, as well as the name of the club, as well as the sort of the day-to-day operational assets, property assets, and the position of property assets that you don't own are critical.
As you did mention at the start, Bill Foley is 77 years old. And the dog's just let himself out.
I've got a very talented dog who can open doors. Sadly, you can't close them.
No, that's brilliant. Of course, he is 77 years old. And, touch wood, Bill Foley will be with us for a long, long period of time. However, we have seen it at Manchester United, where Malcolm Glazer passed away and his sons took over. What sort of contingency planning would he have had to put in place and also convince the Premier League of in the event of something like that?
Well, he appears to be front of house.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned some other investors. They won't have put money into this project unless there was succession planning.
Yeah.
And again, nobody wishes the passing away of another soul, but we also acknowledge that we're on the clock. So it could be that he's doing this with a view to passing it on to family. It could be that when we talk about the acquisition of Chelsea, for example, all of the talk is about Todd Boehly. But when you see the small print, it's actually Clearlake Capital who have put up 60% of the funds, and Todd Boehly is the public face of the deal. So small print, once again, I don't want to keep mentioning it, but small print determines what would happen under those circumstances. The last thing that anybody wants is a takeover, and then something has to happen relatively quickly. whilst it's a long way and it's many divisions away from Bournemouth, we've seen the takeover of York City, for example, which went through in July, and 5 months later the new owner's looking to sell because he's fallen out with the fans, and that just creates uncertainty. It doesn't allow you to have a strategic plan, and I think Bournemouth need a strategic plan with regards to how the club is going to grow, because it's likely we're going to move to, not just in the Premier League but also into the EFL, a new method of financial fair play, which is likely to be a wage cap linked to revenues. And clearly the biggest constraint that AFC Bournemouth have is that with 11,000 capacity stadium, that instantly puts a ceiling on match day income.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, one thing that is mentioned in that documentation is the growth of the club, and aiming to get people involved in AFC Bournemouth from not just this country, not just Dorset and Somerset, but further afield as well. Michael B. Jordan, who is, of course, an actor, and Nullah Sarker as well, who does really excite me because looking at his credentials and what he's done, he's the former director of Lava Music Publishing, also LMS Ventures. So he's got quite a lot of companies with on his portfolio. Is that probably going to be their task to actually increase this brand?
Yes, and you're a fan of AFC Bournemouth,
Mhm.
and even saying the word brand, you're probably having to say it through gritted teeth. But it's
Yeah.
also a realization that that's where we are in 2022. The Premier League is broadcast to every country on the planet, I think, except 4 or 5, and I don't think you'd be too worried about not managing to get into Afghanistan or North Korea, which are on the non-recipient list.
Yeah.
They're not going to be growth markets. So you've got the opportunity to get hold of people's eyeballs. Anybody that's watched the documentary in relation to Reynolds and McElhenney, Welcome to Wrexham it's a great piece of entertainment,
Mhm.
and it uses a football club to entertain, but it's not about
Yeah.
football. And again, if we take a look at some of the most successful docu-series in recent years, it's about people. And if one of those people is a bit of Hollywood sprinkle, Hollywood stardust about them, then you're going to get more people to watch the first episode. And if that first episode is good, they'll watch the second, and the club can benefit from that. So that could be the reason for the link with Michael B. Jordan, and the club will be able to benefit from that in due course. Getting the name of the club into more people's vocabulary is critical, because the Premier League's a tough league. 3 teams are going to be relegated every season, and we know that 6 teams probably are never going to get relegated. Probably 7 teams never going to get relegated. Now we've got Newcastle. So I think there has to be an element of realism in terms of what can be achieved, but trying to get an awareness of the club through having some form of association with success elsewhere in other industries, or through better utilization of marketing and commercial development, it is critical, because the chances are that your wage bill in 3 years' time in the Premier League is going to be 70% or 80% of your Premier League revenues. So if you can't grow match day, if we're still playing at Dean Court, then there's a ceiling there. Broadcast income is to a large extent determined by results and by formulas which you as a football club at Bournemouth have 1 vote out of 20, so you don't control those. So therefore, commercial income is the single greatest potential area of growth for the club.
And one thing that Bill Foley did mention in his letter to the fans was how the club nearly died you know, all those years ago, back in 2008, and even before that, the Winter Garden situation as well. And it makes for a good story. And do you think that there will be a lot of playing on that to try and increase this brand of this club that was on its backside, but then got up and become stronger and stronger and stronger, and one of the best in this country?
Yeah, rags to riches sells.
Yeah.
So there's and there's an international aspect to it. Having a Russian owner to an American owner, that's intriguing. I think some of the players, not football players, some of the players in the story, I think that could be an opportunity for something very engaging. At the same time, even if this is converted into another Welcome to Wrexham or whatever it's going to be, we are talking about single figure millions, not double or treble figure millions, because the nature of broadcasting is that you've got a budget and a ceiling there as well, and an additional £1 million in the National League is very much a changing amount of money. That's not the case in the Premier League. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about the extent. You'll probably make more money from finishing 13th instead of 14th than you would necessarily generate from one of these docu-series. Although if on the back of that you get a fresh batch of fans, that's potential. But converting fans that are interested in your club into money is the Pandora's box that the whole of football has spent the last decade trying to open, and nobody's managed to do it yet. If you take a look at non-fungible tokens, which was where the big clubs thought that they'd found a route of riches, 90% of those put up for sale by Liverpool, who, let's be honest, club with a pretty good brand, 90% went unsold. Manchester United are trying the same, but the reaction, the hostility from Manchester United fan bases to getting some very vague description of utility and intangible benefits from the club, the more questions you ask of the people trying to sell these, and I'll call them magic beans because I think that's the closest analogy that we have. The more awkward the answers, and as somebody, I've been invited by some of these organisations to attend matches as their guest, which is a very kind thing for them to do, but they don't understand football because I say, well, Brighton are playing at home that day. Why? Yeah, it's very kind of you to ask me to go to the Emirates or Stamford Bridge and be in some swanky hospitality, but I don't care who Brighton are playing. It's my team, just as if exactly the same for you, Craig. If you got a chance to go and see Bournemouth that weekend, well, that's what you do because you're a Bournemouth fan.
Exactly.
So wait and see, but I think it's whoever gets there first is going to be very, very wealthy.
Final question before I let you go, Kieran. So looking 5 years down the line, so 5 years into Bill Foley's reign here at Dean Court, or wherever we might be, how different could we imagine that it could be compared to this point where we are at the moment?
I think there will be greater engagement between owner and fans. You will now know Bill Foley in exactly the same way that nobody really knew Maxim Demin, because he was a man who valued his privacy, who was in a position where he could live in a variety of locations and spread his issues around. So I think you will see a more commercially punchy club. I think Bournemouth will try to get out there a bit. It has perhaps wouldn't describe it as twee, but it sort of used that homely homely viewpoint taken by many football fans. It's a nice club. It's a friendly club, and so on. And I suspect it will become a bit more in your face. It will be a bit more Vegas, and Vegas is considerably different to Sandlands.
Yep, definitely. And do you think the likes of Neil Blake, Jeff Mostyn, Richard Hughes, who have done such a good job, to be honest, some fans feel that they have made mistakes throughout the years, and no doubt there's probably things that they'd like to do differently, but they've kept us on such a good financial footing and managed this club well. But do you think Bill Foley probably want to bring in his own people as well to make it more Vegas?
It depends how the conversations have gone between the parties. It could be that they will bring in their own people in addition to the existing executive. We've seen different approaches taken. So if we look at what's happened at Chelsea when their US owners came in earlier this year, Bruce Buck went, Marina went, Petr Cech went. An awful lot of Chelsea stalwarts who had to deal with a fairly challenging period of time in the club's history earlier this year. They were jettisoned, and they know where the bodies lie. They know what works and doesn't work historically, and sometimes the ability to give a balanced perspective of things is beneficial. At the same time, when you just spent 120 million pounds on a shiny new toy, perhaps you don't want anybody telling you how to play with your shiny new toy, and you can understand an owner being reticent. But there's a good case for keeping the existing executive. Have they made mistakes? Well, yeah, but you show me anybody in business that hasn't made mistakes.
Yeah. They're very, very true. Well, thank you so much again, Kieran, for coming on. It's always great to have you on this show and so insightful. And, by all means, hopefully, when we have started spending some of this money and when this potential new grounds is all agreed, we'll get you back on and we'll discuss the financials behind all that as well.
Tremendous. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much again, Kieran. Take care.
Cheerio now.
Cheers. Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining me on this show. Please remember to hit the like, the subscribe, the bell button to be alerted to any new videos we do here at the Cherries and All Departments. Please do also check out our recent interviews. We've had Mark McAdam on when we announced that Gary O'Neill was going to be permanent manager. We've also had Charlie Daniels on the show, James Hayter. We've also had a previous owner as well on the show. So please do check out all of our interviews. And I'm sure that you'll find something that is really, really interesting on here. Please do leave any comments as well that you may have. Our email address is below. But until next one, up the cherries, and we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us.